Angela Merici lived from 1474 to 1540 and was influential in the history of the church for establishing the Company of St. Ursula and for educating the poor and hopeless children during her time. Angela and her sister became orphans when they were young and were sent to live with an uncle where they were raised in a devoted Christian home. However, family tragedy was not yet over for Angela. While still a teenager, she lost her sister. Furthermore, her sister passed without taking sacraments, and this left Angela wondering about the salvation of her sister. Then, at the age of 20, Angela lost her uncle. These experiences as an orphan influenced the trajectory of Angela's life. Angela went on to join the Third Order of St. Francis while she was still young. One can clearly see Angela developing as a minister at this point in her life. While living with another Christian family, Angela was convicted by the Holy Spirit by the calling to establish a religious community. Angela was deeply convicted to minister to the uneducated poor children around her. Christian education was the solution to the broken families and poverty that Angela observed. Angela wanted to prepare girls for healthy lives by teaching them Christian virtues and skills needed for life. Moreover, she understood the value of Christian education for all children, and the hope that comes from giving young girls meaningful education. Angela began collecting girls to help in her work. The number of women working with Angela grew quickly, and the group would eventually grow into the Company of St. Ursula. They lived in their own homes, and the group lacked formal vows, but the women consecrated their lives for the ministry of Christian education. Not only was Angela successful in establishing a school in one town, but she was also able to expand into neighboring areas. Later in life, Angela took a pilgrimage to the Holy Lands. However, before making her arrival in the Holy Land, Angela was struck blind. Yet, she continued on her journey and visited holy sites without physical sight. On her journey home, her vision was restored. After her death, the Company of St. Ursula, whose members are also known as the Angelines, went on to be formally recognized for its Christian work in 1546.
All right, now it's time for us to ask the question, hot, not, or sanctified. Is Angela Merici a positive theological inspiration? Which in that case we would say hot. If she is not, then we'll say not. We do not like her. And if we say sanctified, we're not necessarily saying that Angela Merici is sanctified, though that may be a separate issue. She may be, she may not be. We're saying only God's sanctified judgment can rule whether or not she is a positive theological inspiration. So let's go around and ask whether or not she is. Amanda, what do you think?
Well, I definitely think for Angela Merici, she's a hot or positive theological influence. She establishes this order. Well, actually, it's not an order, but a company for girls to participate in the life of the church, and they reach out into their community. So that's definitely something that can be inspiring to all of us.
Anthony, what do you think? Hot, not, or sanctified?
I would definitely say hot. She took a lot of personal initiative there, and one thing too is that she looked very, very holistically at the situation too. What she was doing was regarded as secular, which is kind of funny compared to today. It's not the same secular as today. It was more like a secular of not directly related to theology, but she was taking care of things in the home that Christians did need to worry about, and that young Christian girls were going to have to worry about in their future also. So I think that that's really important and really admirable.
Well, just building off that for a little bit, again, what she was doing was originally called a secular institution, though it was later recognized as being work of the church and being a religious institution. But while she was alive, it was considered a secular thing, but it's very interesting because so many times when we think of secular in our modern world, we think of something which is oftentimes either completely atheistic or sometimes it's even hostile towards the church. But her mentality was, there's a lot of poverty around me, and I want to do something to fix this, and building up families starting from within. And again, it was interesting because she really does have a long-term plan for this. And it's this idea that if we build children up where they can go out into the world, and as they become adults, they will be prepared for the next generation. She really has a very broad mindset of what's going on. She doesn't just see what's in front of her. She's able to look beyond her own circumstances and say, we need to put things in motion which will have a lasting effect on the world around us. Well, before I share my thoughts, we actually have one more person with us here in our studio, and we're going to let Mrs. Cattleguard And you may have seen Mrs. Cattleguard in her kitchen, but we're going to let her tell us what you think. So, Mrs. Cattleguard, what are your thoughts? Hot, not, or sanctified?
Well, hello, this is Mrs. Cattleguard speaking. And, I've got to thank Kingdom Logos for my little spotlight and the fame here for a little bit. I've been around quite frequently here, and I appreciate it. But, I've got to say, not. And here's why. I don't think Angela Merici's not. I think she's not because, had she voted the right person in office, she wouldn't have had to deal with any of that. I mean, I'm all for the education of children. I mean, that's great and all. But, had she put the right person in office, that would have been done. Could have been done better. It's the government. They could have done a better job. They've got taxes and all that stuff. So, that's all I've got to say about that.
Well, that was one opinion. Dylan, would you like to continue?
Well, we're going to have a talk with Mrs. Cattleguard. We did give her our own program, but we'll see how all of that pans out. My thoughts, of course, is that she is, in fact, hot. I think it's a very, very positive thing. It's a great role model for us to follow. I think Angela Merici is unmistakably one of the saints from church history that people should do more like today. And does anyone want to respond to Mrs. Cattleguard?
Just real quickly, it is kind of funny, and we kind of laugh at Miss Cattleguard's extreme opinion, but she makes some points that a lot of people think about, that if we elect the right person, if we can just get the government to do the right thing, then everything would be okay. And it would be nice if our government could do the right thing a lot of times. But regardless of if they do or if they don't, Angela Merici becomes a hot inspiration because she takes the initiative. She does it. She organizes, like Pastor Dylan said. She thinks long term about establishing a cycle that will continue to create a healthy environment for people. So,
yeah, and I think that's really something we can take from this, just having a long-term plan. Anthony?
I was just going to say that it is that sort of opinion is kind of funny, and how it seems so ridiculous now. But that's also because hindsight is 2020. You know, if we don't have specific examples of people who have gone out and taken the personal initiative, it might seem like a legitimate idea to go and to get the right person in office to seek a bureaucratical answer. But
yeah,
I think whenever we look at history and
well, this is one of the reasons why I do think church history is so important, because we have such wonderful role models that are oftentimes overlooked. And Angela Merici is unmistakably one of those. Well, we'll wrap up our conversation there.